joining us in person and also on Zoom. We are just gonna kind of roll right in since we have a lot to pack in here, but I'm glad that this, we're hosting the second event in the Camden Talks Climate Series in partnership with the town of Camden and the CamdenCAN. Zoom folks, you can type your questions or comments into the chat or Q&A as usual, and I'll read them out loud at the end. And now I'll hand it over to Molly Mulhern from CamdenCAN.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, everybody. My name is Molly Mulhern. As Julia suggested, I am privileged to be one of the people who started CamdenCAN. We're a citizen-led initiative in town designed to try to get people to talk about climate in town. We've been working with the town of Camden since, I think, May to sort of bring topics to the core. In tonight's panel, we are going to talk about Camden specifically. If you didn't catch it last month, we had a panel that was moderated that was about what other towns in the area have been doing for their climate action strategies. That is available on the town website at the YouTube channel. If you just type in CamdenCAN, you can listen to that. It was a wonderful exchange of people from up and down the mid-coast. I want to just take a moment here to say thank you to the steering committee for CamdenCAN. We have a few in the audience, a few up on the panel, and a few over here. So we're always open to being added to our ranks. We have a steering committee. There's some sign-up sheets on the back. We have a newsletter that we publish every 2 weeks. It talks about what's happening in town for environmental and other climate action. And we couldn't do this work without you. So we like feedback, we like energy, we like feedback that says what we're not doing or what we should be doing. So there's a survey card on your chair. If you've already taken the survey, thank you. If you haven't, go ahead and do it. If you've taken it and you want to pass that to somebody else, that's fine too. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Esperanza Stancioff, one of our founding members. She is a professor emerita from the university, as she's been working at the University of Maine, or had been working at the University of Maine, 34 years of the Sea Grant and the Cooperative Extension. She's extremely knowledgeable in the climate field. Unfortunately for the humane system, she's retired, but fortunate for Camden, she's helping us with our work here. So we really want to thank her for that. And so I just, with no further ado, here's Esperanza.
Thanks, Molly.
Yeah.
Julia, I just got a message that the Zoom, the video's not working.
So there is a video. People on Zoom, if you go up into your right-hand corner, you can select whether you're viewing the screen shared or the camera angle, and you can make it bigger. And I'll type more into the chat, but the video is there now.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's really great to see a multi-generational crowd here. Thank you all for coming. Welcome. It's great that you're here, and we're going to learn a lot about the past, present, and future regarding the variety of work that's happened here in our community. Tonight, we're going to hear from 5 presenters who have made a difference in Camden, and each have information to share about their efforts, and I consider them local champions. We'll hear from all the presenters first, and then take your questions at the end, along with any questions that might be on Zoom. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first 2 speakers, because they'll be kind of going back and forth. They're from the great work that's happened at the Watershed School. And I'm going to introduce Janet McMahon. Janet is an ecologist who works with land trusts, conservation organizations, state agencies, and private landowners to identify, understand, and design landscape scale conservation areas and climate corridors. She studied biology and geology at Colby College and has a master's degree in plant ecology from the University of Maine. She served on the faculty Watershed School for 12 years, where she taught courses in global climate change, world geography, and conservation biology. And then also Alex Facq, who is a 2023 graduate of Colby College with a major in environmental policy. Alex graduated from Watershed High School, where they were a member of the Camden Energy Committee and one of the students involved in helping Camden to join the Global Covenant of Mayors for Camden for Climate. Alex is also a member of CamdenCAN. In their free time, Alex enjoys glass blowing and cross-country skiing. So you guys take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. For 10 years, I taught a climate change course at Watershed School. And we'd start by focusing on the science, things like energy balance, the carbon cycle, the greenhouse effect. And then we'd shift to what the instrumental record shows and going back in time, what glaciers show, that type of thing. And then we talk about policy starting at international, national, Maine, and then the community and individuals, and to talk about what's happening following that trajectory. And the science and policy piece was really good to build a foundation. And in the end, I felt like the students knew way more than the average person in the community. But it also could be really overwhelming. So right away, we decided to spend the last 6 weeks of the year doing nothing but a project, a hands-on project that would have some tangible impact in the community. And so we did that virtually every year since 2010. So the students would have the final say in the project. But as we went on, they get more and more focused on things they felt that they would hope the town would start working on. So what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes talking about some of the projects the student did, sort of a timeline. And when we started out, the school was in Rockland. So the first 2 years, we actually did street light inventory. And we looked at every single street light in Camden. At that time, they were all halogen. There were no LED lights. And the goal was to try to nudge the town into shifting that direction. We were actually asked by the town to do it. So that took 2 years. And one interesting take-home fact was that we found they looked at a lot of research on what other towns in New England had done, and Rockland had more streetlights per capita than any town they researched. There's a lot of streetlights in Camden. So that was 2010, 2011. In 2012, they decided to survey the 4 high schools in the area, Madomic, Oceanside, Camden, and then Watershed students, and to see what they knew about climate change, what they thought about it, what they thought about the science. They basically used a survey that Yale University gives to adults every year, to thousands of adults across the country, and they compared those results. And one of the interesting things was, in general, the students were more concerned than the adults. They were more certain that they were already being impacted, and they were more trusting of the science, not really surprising. And also an interesting thing was girls tended to be higher in all of those categories than boys, which we weren't expecting. In 2015, the school had moved to Camden, and the students decided to do a detailed inventory of municipal energy use. And what they found, some of the things they found were that the Snow Bowl by far used the most energy. And then school buses were next. And interestingly, the Opera House and this building, this library building, have very high fuel use. I don't know if that's changed, but, and then they came up with ideas, an action plan to try to reduce emissions. And at that time at Snow Bowl, they were thinking expanding it. The building wasn't even going to face south. You know, they were pointing out things like that, kind of no-brainers from their end. And that particular study helped spur the town to reestablish the town energy committee. It had been disbanded, and from that point on, a Watershed student served on that committee. And also it helped spur the town to put its first solar array up. In 2017, the students did a detailed analysis of sea level rise projections and the impacts of those on the town's waterfront. And the town has incorporated a lot of that work into some of their studies and storylines and things you'll see online. I think the report is on their website. And it was very detailed, using Maine Geological Survey maps and projections and stuff that the town had not done up to that point. In 2018, at the urging of Watershed and Camden Hill students, high school students, the Camden Select Board voted to join the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. And this was fairly new at that point. Camden was the first town in Maine to do so. And now it's one of more than 13,000 towns across the globe that accounts for 25% of the world's population, or almost 25%. And the covenant was a response to the Paris Climate Accord, which I think was in 2014. And at that point, and we hear it more urgently every year, there was a call to keep warming under 2 degrees Celsius or 3.6 Fahrenheit by reducing emissions by 80%. So the covenant was built around that. What they wanted was towns to commit to working towards those goals, at the town level. And by signing on, the town volunteered to do 3 things. The first was a detailed inventory of town emissions, not just municipal, but the whole town. The second was a vulnerability assessment. And the third was an action plan that looked at both adaptation and mitigation. These 3 steps were the students' projects in 2018, 2019, and 2020. The town basically agreed to sign on if Watershed students would do the work. So Watershed students did the work. I mean, it was very preliminary. It's really meant to be a launching out off point. And some things have been followed up on, some haven't. But anyway, you can see, I think those reports, at least some of them are on the town website. And I also have copies of a bunch of them right here, the old-fashioned way. And so now I'm going to turn it off to Alex, who was instrumental in the first report on the inventory. And they, as I believe that's Bronson mentioned, now sits on this committee, which is great.
As Jan said, as a student in Janet's class all those years ago, this project first started for me as one of the students petitioning the select board to join the covenant under the promise that as a student at Watershed, we would take on the work associated with doing so. And so we began this project as a class, first by reading reports and case studies from a bunch of other communities across the country. I believe just within the US, to get a sense of what kinds of data they were collecting, what problems they ran into, what were they focusing on. And I think these gave us a really important and solid foundation on how we should be structuring our report and what was really important for us to look at. As we went through this, we also began planning out what data we would need to get a comprehensive greenhouse gas emissions inventory, since there's a lot of potential sources of emissions and a lot of them aren't that obvious. And even beyond that, figuring out who in our community would actually have the data that we needed, because it was kind of scattered throughout various organizations, whether it's the town government, Central Maine Power, local energy companies like that sell heating oil, or wood for stoves. And as we collected this data, it turned out to be quite a lot, and we began compiling it into a tool provided to us by the Global Covenant of Mayors, ClearPath, which was a tool designed to make the actual calculations and making what data we would need a lot clearer and to help with the analysis. As we began analyzing the data, it painted a pretty clear picture of the town's emissions. About half of the town's emissions are from residential energy use, and half of that is from residential heating. Another 25% was from transportation, but that residential energy use is really the big piece that the town has control over of its emissions, since most of the transportation use is just from cars driving through the town, which is harder to control. And seeing that, it emphasized how important reducing the energy use of residential heating was, and gave really important guidance on the town of what we should work on. In particular, improving things like home efficiency, which is often a much cheaper and rapid way to reduce energy usage, became clearly important. And for instance, there's been a recent local effort from window dressers, and since the time this data was collected, they've actually installed 700 inserts in about 80 homes in Camden, which is really the key pace we need to be focusing on. Moving forward, this is the data that the town really needs to be looking at for where our emissions are coming from, and possibly getting more of it that's updated. Thanks. Back to Janet.
Thank you. I was asked to do some sort of takeaways from teaching for those years, so that's what this is going to be about. I hope I didn't just undo something. Oh no, that was just the slides. So I just want to, teaching high school students is really powerful in this day and age, you know, seeing what's going on in the world, seeing what they have to deal with. And one thing that became clear is that they've never known a normal. I mean, every year we taught it, we'd be breaking the global temperature records or extreme events or fires, you name it, there's just not a normal. There's not a normal winter. They can't expect snow, for instance. It's just really different. And another thing that struck me was when they would see solar panels or wind turbines, or there's a lot of discussion about the offshore wind or whatever it is, that would give, for the most part, students a lot of hope, whereas a lot of adults would have this sort of NIMBY attitude, not my backyard, or think they were ugly. My father always used to say how ugly solar panels were. More open-minded and willing to think outside the box, I found, which I think is critical. And it became clear how important it was to make sure everyone knows how this transcends town boundaries. I mean, it's interesting to see each town sort of reinventing the wheel, and I caution against doing that because, the atmosphere is all of ours. And there's so much work to do. So learning from each other like you're doing is great. I feel like students have a huge part to play, just based on, like, without Alex, we couldn't have figured out that ClearPath tool. He was just more agile in working with that type of technology, for one. And also people were really interested in helping. I feel like their voices need to be part of the discussion, not just they come to an event like this, but we need to be in the schools. There's a lot of students who want to help. And we need to know what their perspective is and really tap into that. And just to show how powerful their voices are, when we gave the presentation, I think it was in this room, to the select board and a packed house, there were like 80 people from the community about sea level rise. One of the select board members said, "Why haven't we heard this before?" And the students were incredulous to hear that. It's like, you haven't, like, this is new to you? That this is what the shoreline's going to look like in 50 years. But it also gave people a sense of power, that they did have a good foundation and that they could use that voice to start to sway some opinions. And they weren't afraid to think big. For example, one of the things we did in 2020, I think it was 2 years after that first report that Alex worked on, was the action plan, which hasn't gotten a lot of reading, actually. It was done, COVID came, and we did the report somehow miraculously. I don't think it's on the website, and there's 10 steps that we proposed, but one was to solarize the town. We looked at every single rooftop, which angle it was facing, if there were trees shading it, businesses and houses, and discovered that 50% of the roofs in the town have potential for solar. And at that time, there were only 22 installations that we could see. We were doing all this on Google, installed in Camden, which was pretty stunning. Camden had very few compared to some other towns, but now there are, just from revision alone, 126 arrays in Camden. So things have changed since then, which is encouraging, but still, there's so far to go. There's just so many opportunities, and the students were clear to see those. It wasn't like, oh, we can't do this. It's like, why don't we try this? And then I guess just to encourage you, I feel like knowledge empowers action. Teaching students, I think, is so important. And that action brings hope and then more action. And if you see people doing it, there's a domino effect. So congratulations you for forming this committee. I hope the Energy Committee reforms in Camden, or that this is the substitute for it. We just have to keep plugging away. So thank you.
Thank you both. It's great. So next up, we have Sarah Miller. Sarah Miller is a semi-retired international energy and business journalist and editor. She has lived in Missouri, Brussels, Washington, D.C., London, New York City, and now Camden, where she is active in numerous community organizations. Sarah was on the last Camden Energy and Sustainability Committee and is a founding member of CamdenCAN. She is also a blogger on Medium and on Penn Bay Pilot.
Thank you. I don't have long, and I don't want to take long, but I do want to convey that, contrary to what a lot of people think, Camden's actually been we're out there in the climate action field for quite a long time, and at least on occasion has been reasonably effective, thanks in part to some people here in this room. But in any case, the first Energy Committee was established in 2006. Not all that long after that, it had a notable success in helping to negotiate a net metering deal that kept a small hydroelectric facility out at Seabright Dam going for 9 extra years beyond when it might have done otherwise. By 2010, the committee was quite involved in trying to assess the just the kind of possibility, the technical possibility for wind power on some town property at Ragged Mountain, also, as some of you, probably most of you know, home to the Snow Bowl. And in that effort, they got a technical study done by UMass Amherst, which, to probably nobody's surprise who's ever been up there, showed that there is wind. But in fact, by that time, a citizens group had formed in opposition to any wind power. There wasn't yet at that stage a plan for what wind power, but in opposition to any wind power on Ragged Mountain. And it won the day, in fact, so definitively that in short order, the Energy Committee was suspended for what turned out to be 5 years. And when it came back in 2015, it was, as Janet mentioned, thanks in no small part to the stimulus of the Watershed School's report on a carbon neutral Camden. And at that point, when it was called Energy and Sustainability Committee, not just energy. Solar replaced wind as the renewable energy source of interest. And in not much over 2 years, there was a 351 panel solar array up and operating on town property at Sagamore Farm, kind of off the road, going toward Belfast, which provides up to, or in the vicinity of, shall we say, 10% of the municipal power. It doesn't technically provide, let me correct that. It provides the equivalent of, it feeds into the system and we get back, therefore, free of charge, 10% of the municipal power use of the town, which doesn't sound like much until, as again, Janet mentioned, you realize that Camden uses a lot more electricity than most towns its size due to the basically the snowball. Soon after that, at kind of the same year, Camden joined the, or signed on to the Global Covenant of Mayors. And also over this period of time, the committee provided a lot of the foot power and general legwork for, well, they didn't actually, that makes it sound like they installed the lights. They didn't install LEDs, but they worked with the town to figure out where LEDs should be and how they should operate, and just did a lot of the work for that. And that has cut the cost of lighting this town by 70 to 80%, not a small thing. Then moving on to January 2021, so you may remember, some of you, the town held a town meeting during COVID in the parking lot of the Snow Bowl, back to the Snow Bowl, and where we, from the relative safety of our cars, if you want to look at them that way, voted in favor of a $2.3 million contract to do energy efficiency work on town buildings. That had support from the Energy Committee, although there was also some concern among some members about a geothermal project that was part of the contract a geothermal project at the Snow Bowl. And that was really never dealt with before the next month after the meeting up at the Snow Bowl and all that fun. The committee was suspended yet again. This time, like all the other town committees that are not required by state law. And that's where we stand today. Now, fortunately, there was enough impetus going that some of the committee members led by Nancy Harmon Jenkins and with help from the library here, did a series of 4 programs, Zoom programs, looking at energy efficiency and its potential and possibility and some other new energy thing at the level of households, 1 program at the level of businesses, at the town, and for the state. That was great. Unfortunately, the other things that the committee was involved with at that point have mainly gone quiet. Now, that includes an informal but frequently referred to goal to for the town to either buy into or build enough solar generation to cover 100% of its needs rather than 10, and also an energy savings campaign that was going to be targeted specifically at low-income households. We're hopeful and hoping that CamdenCAN, as an independent climate action group, which works with the town but not under the aegis of the town, can fill a lot of that gap and can provide good assistance to Jeremy, Dave, and other town officials on revitalizing Camden's attempts both to limit climate change and to cope with the climate change that we get regardless. And over to them.
So in 2021, the George Mitchell Center for Sustainability Solutions at UMaine funded a project titled Collaborating Toward Climate Solutions. Our working group interviewed Jeremy Martin of Camden and other officials in Western Penobscot Bay communities. We facilitated meetings both to better understand what work had been accomplished by the towns and to understand their needs regarding adapting to the impacts of climate change. We provided funding from both, we provided funding to students from both Bowdoin College and UMaine Machias to work with these communities to develop educational resources such as the sea level rise story map, which resides on the Camden Town website. We introduced the Maine Flood Resiliency Checklist, which is a self-assessment tool designed to assist Maine communities evaluate how well positioned they are to prepare for, respond to, and recover from flooding events and sea level rise. It offers a practical framework for examining local flood risk, evaluating vulnerability of the natural, the built, and the social environments, and to identify opportunities to enhance flood resilience. Additionally, it allows communities to identify specific areas where local decision makers can develop policy, strategies, and actions to address areas of vulnerability. So, and with that, I'd like to introduce Jeremy Martin, who will provide a synopsis of Camden's work to date and some plans going forward. So Jeremy is Camden's Planning and Development Director. Jeremy has over 25 years of experience in land use planning, zoning, permitting, and regulatory compliance. He oversees all land use planning and environmental permitting and compliance, as well as the administration of the Maine Uniform Building and Energy Code for the town of Camden. He also has taken, Jeremy has also taken on the role coordinating climate resilience and adaptation for Camden. He is certified in shoreland zoning, floodplain management, and land use planning, as well as building codes administration by the state of Maine's Department of Economic and Community Development. Prior to joining Camden in March of 2018, Jeremy served as the City of Bangor's Director of Code Enforcement, Permitting, and Inspections. Prior to that, he served as the city's Development Coordinator and Zoning Administrator. He also worked as an environmental specialist with the Cobbossee Watershed District in Winthrop, Maine, and was a land use consultant for the Maine Association of Conservation Districts. He began his work in watershed management as a natural resource specialist with the China Region Lakes Alliance, where he worked on non-point source pollution and reduction programs. Jeremy has a bachelor's degree from West Virginia University, where he studied geography and political science. He also studied environmental policy and forestry at Unity College.
Perfect.
Your turn.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. Thanks for touching base on how many times it sounds like the Energy Committee was slapped by the select board. I just wanted to.
Just the facts.
Yeah, I guess I'll touch base really quickly on the solar array at Sagamore Farm. Like Sarah said, went online in 2018. 351 panels there. Last year, there was provided 165,386 kilowatt hours of zero emission solar power, which prevented about 175,000 pounds of CO2 getting into the atmosphere. Sarah did say it's about 10% of the town's energy use. Is really about 8%. So thanks for that added too. I appreciate it.
Maybe.
And we did do in 2019, the select board was interested in moving some more solar forward. We didn't really know where we were going to do that or how we were going to do it. It was at about the time that the state was in the process, and the PUC was changing their rules and their programs too. So it was kind of an odd time, to be honest. And I think that's really what kind of stunted that movement moving forward. We did do, I don't know if you remember, in Union, there's an old Superfund site in Union Chemical, that the state of Maine ended up taking ownership over after the EPA came in and did a big cleanup there. The town submitted to an RFP that the state had for use of that property. It was our intention, and we submitted to the state that we wanted that property. We wanted to install a very large solar farm on that property in order to cover 100%, hopefully 100% of the town's energy demand. The state in turn did not give us the property. They gave it to, I think, the local, I think he runs a truck towing business over there, and they're adjacent to that property in the town. They sold it to him. Sorry. Yes. Thank you, Vicki. We were kind of, I think, a little frustrated because we were really, it was when GoPIP started, and it was, the whole new governor came in and was really reinvigorating planning work and climate change work in the state, which really went the other way with the prior governor. Unfortunately, it didn't play out. So we did retain a solar consultant. He came in and did a solar feasibility study for us, and looked at what our projected, use. And so our kilowatt hours is about 2,121,635 kilowatt hours per year is our use of electricity. And again, the Sagamore Farm is about 8%. He looked at properties, the Public Works building, and similar to what Janet was referring to when Watershed looked at rooftop solar. Rich Roughgarden did look at Public Works facility, public safety building, an expansion at Sagamore Farm. And he did look at doing an installation at the tannery as well. We know where that's gone. And he did look at the snowball too. When he did it, he came up with about 30%, about 800,000 kilowatt hours is what we could gain from those properties. that combined with the 10% would be about 40% of our power usage. We have not moved forward on any of that. I'm not sure where the select board is right now on it. It hasn't been on their, I don't want to say it's not a priority because I think certainly it's a priority. But there's just been a lot of things going on. So I would like to move something forward at some point here. Jumping into the Siemens project that town voted on, the 2.3 million or whatever that was pretty, I just got the report, the summary after a year of that project and going through, that saved electric savings there about 253,000 kilowatt hours of the whole entire Siemens project. And so what the Siemens project did was went to all of our infrastructure, the Camden Public Library, the Public Works facility, the Public Safety Building, the town office, the Opera House, the Snow Bowl, and it looked at doing some energy improvement and energy efficient work, energy efficiency work. Lighting retrofits, building envelope work, air sealing and insulation work, new windows, boiler replacement. This facility has a new boiler. And we did the geothermal project out at the Snow Bowl. And building automation and energy management systems were installed as well. And they did do some air quality work as well. So when you look at all of that, the 252,000, that's about 12% of that 2.1 million or so. So combine that with the Sagamore Farm at 8, we're about 20% right now for electric use. The Snow Bowl is definitely, I was paging through in Rich Roughgarden's report earlier today, and the Snow Bowl is by far the big energy, use. And I think everyone understands that, there's a benefit to have that mountain, the mountain there, but there is definitely a cost to it from the environmental perspective. So I think moving forward there, we are going to look at some efficiencies that we can kind of continue to do, and hopefully we can try to get into a solar system at some point. The streetlight conversion that I think the Watershed started, or at least the Energy Committee got going in 2017. The downtown streetlights were converted. There's 52 LEDs were installed, and they reduced electricity consumption by 82% in the downtown area. And then in 2019 and 20, we did an entire streetlight conversion throughout the entire town. And that was about almost 300, Dave, 300 lights, 290 something, but we had to go through a whole process. Those are CMP's lights originally, since Maine Power owns all those lights. So we had to work with CMP to actually purchase all of that equipment on those poles. And then we ended up converting them. So we did convert all of those to LED, and that's at a 70 to 80% reduction of electricity consumption. So all these things do add up as we continue. And every year's more efficiency, more savings, and then less CO2 into the atmosphere as well. As a planner and overseeing planning and development department, a lot of what we do is land use activity and regulating it, and how can we do things differently. We have a zoning ordinance, we have shoreline zoning, we have a floodplain ordinance. And all these things can play into how we address or adapt to sea level rise. One of the things that I think that we did in 2019 or 20, every community in the county, and every county has to have a hazard mitigation plan. And this is part of the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000. This is a federal requirement. And so every community has to kind of sign on to this hazard mitigation plan. And things like sea level rise and flooding, these natural occurrences that we see every year, we're generally not in hazard mitigation plans. In 2019 to 20, we made an effort to include sea level rise, severe storm events, summer and winter, and as well as actually forest fire. To include that in the Camden's section of that hazard mitigation plan, the select board approved that. And now that is part of the Knox County hazard mitigation plan. And the reason that's important is you have to have a hazard mitigation plan, and you have to identify these things in order to get hazard mitigation funding moving forward from the federal government. And we're trying to use some of hazard mitigation funding, and kind of a wonky thing, but there was a very nasty storm that happened when it was a Halloween 4 years ago. But we saw some pretty significant damage all over, Snowball in particular. And we can get, when a disaster is declared by the president, we can apply for funds. They reimburse us for costs. Generally, they don't reimburse us, so it doesn't really cover the entirety of the project. But if you want to do something different, they'll give you money to replace exactly what failed. Well, generally there's a reason why that failed. And you don't want to go back, right? But they'll pay you to put it back the way it was, or they'll give you some funding to do a hazard mitigation project. And the only way to do that hazard mitigation project is if it's in your hazard mitigation plan. So we are working with FEMA still, trying to go through that process all these years later. For the Snowball. And what else do we have? Esperanza mentioned the flood resilience checklist, and we really appreciate the university and the state reaching out to the town to do that with us. We got a group together, myself, Dave St. Laurent, planning board member, I think the fire chief was involved, and a bunch of other folks. And like Esperanza said, it's a really good self-assessment tool that communities can use to assess risk, what the risks are in a community, and come up with strategies to address those moving forward. What I really like and appreciate and value about the town of Camden is a lot of these things, and we haven't finalized that checklist, that process yet, and we're going to, but a lot of things that identifies it are things that we are already doing, and we have been doing from one department to another department. And part of that program is about sharing information across departments. And I think we have some pretty forward-thinking staff that really takes a look at the big picture when these things, when we're working on these kind of projects, whether it's Dave doing sewer and storm work or stormwater work, or when we're reviewing projects in planning and development office, or proposing amendments to the zoning ordinance or shoreline zoning, we are thinking about all of these different issues as we propose these things. So we are doing that, and we've identified our critical infrastructure and the areas that we have problems and we have issues with, and we are moving forward. Dave, I'm sure he's got his capital planning program and his list of sites that need to be addressed and when they need to be addressed, as do we in our department are doing those things. And one of the things that the floodplain or the flood resilience checklist can guide you to are things like reassessing your floodplain ordinance. We have a floodplain ordinance someone owns a property in the flood zone. FEMA requires you to have flood insurance if you're getting a mortgage. But it also requires, even if you're not getting a mortgage that's federally backed, that you have to build and design your project in such a way that it reduces damage to that property due to flooding. The flood zone is what it is. We also know that that's just a 100-year storm event. The storm events that we're seeing because of climate change are increased intensity, lots more precip in a shorter period of time. And so we know that that 100-year flood is not probably where we need to be. So we have tools that we can look at amending our flood ordinance, to do things like raise your if a project's in the flood zone, your finished first floor has to be 1 foot above that base flood elevation. Well, oftentimes that's really not enough. So we are looking at things like changing that to like a 3 foot above that base flood elevation. I know that might sound extreme for some, but the reality is when you look at the flood zones in town, it doesn't really necessarily impact the whole heck of a lot of properties. Certainly it impacts properties along the harbor and some by the river. But the insurance rates that people are paying, the property owners are paying for flood insurance are through the roof. I mean, I've heard that they're going 60%, 50, 70% every few years, jumping tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, to have flood insurance. Community rating system, if we go through this program, and it takes about a year, you apply and you've got to do a lot of tweaks to your ordinance, but it reduces significantly those insurance rates that property owners would pay. So there is a kind of a carrot to this that I'm looking at. And then other things that you can do is like in the shoreland zone, those areas that are prone to flooding. We have setbacks from high water from a resource. Well, if the area is prone to flooding, we can actually increase those setbacks to cover those areas that are prone to flooding, which makes a whole heck of a lot of sense to me. And from a stormwater perspective, am I getting to my time? I am. See? Always happens. All right. Dave can acknowledge it. The final thing I guess I'll talk about is the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation in the Future. Governor Mills I commend her and that office for doing the great work that they're doing. Maine Won't Wait and the climate program is amazing. They're just doing great things. They won actually the American Planning Association Climate Award. The state of Maine did for that last year because of the work that the governor's office did. What they did was one of the things they provide grants to communities. They've had 3 funding rounds. I've applied for 3 grants in each one of those rounds. The first round, we got a $50,000 grant, and it was a pass-through grant. This one was to the school district in order for them to be able to purchase an electric school bus, which is a pretty neat thing. The next one, we applied for a grant for our code enforcement officer who's out and about all the time to purchase an electric vehicle. And now we have an electric vehicle that was helped. I mean, there lots of rebates, lots of incentives. I have some paperwork here, but there's lots of incentives out there. Remarkable, we were able to purchase a very nice electric vehicle for about $35,000, and it's all-wheel drive. It's pretty amazing, and we've got some grant money and used incentives to get it. He was driving a very large pickup truck prior to that, so we were able to pull that off the road, and now he's driving an electric vehicle. So that's good. The next one, we just received was a $50,000 grant from them and a $10,000 grant from the Shore and Harbor Planning Grant from the Department of Marine Resources in order to expand upon the back in 2014, we did the T.Y. Lin report, did a public landing, looked at the public landing. Back then, climate change, sea level rise wasn't even talked about in 2014 at all. So that whole T.Y. Lin was done, didn't even think about sea level rise. But we didn't do anything. We put it on a shelf. And then in 2019, the state funded the Wood consulting firm to come in and do a vulnerability assessment of a handful of communities in Penobscot Bay of their municipal infrastructure on the water. Wood came up with this report for us. So we're taking those 2 reports, and I was successful in getting these 2 grants. And we're going to get a consultant to come in and provide us construction drawings. So we have a shovel-ready project at the public landing to redo the public landing and make it resilient to sea level rise and storm surge. Really excited about that. The RFP should go out in about a month, and then we'll go from there. There was a lot of public comment taken back in 2014 when we did the T.Y. Lin report. We're not recreating the wheel with this. We're kind of taking these reports that have been done prior and just carrying them through and hopefully to fruition. There's a lot of money out there. right now to do infrastructure projects. So the idea is to get this thing done in a hurry so that we can get some grant applications out there to get funding to do a complete rebuild of the public landing. So that's what I got. Good. I do have stuff from Efficiency Maine here. I know there's a lot. It's easy to get info now on the internet and all that, but they have lots of incentives and feel free.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Awesome. Dave St. Laurent is Camden's Public Works Director, Road Commissioner, Tree Warden, Dam Control Agent, and Water Resource Manager. David has over 25 years of environmental experience, including working for Beals Island Shellfish Hatchery, Maine Inland Fish and Wildlife, Poland Spring, Bath Iron Works, Fisher Engineering, and the City of Rockland. David has a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Studies from the University of Maine, Machias, and 15 years of municipal experience in the Mid-Coast. Much of his career has been focused on protecting water resources, as well as enjoying much of the recreation it provides. David lives in Rockland.
Thank you. How's everybody doing tonight? Okay, so,
You can tell me when to switch the slide.
okay, great. So, you know, I look at climate change and global warming like a genie that's been let out of the bottle. And there's really not a lot we're going to do right at this point in time other than try to reduce, you know, our consumption of fuel and try to change things. But we're heading in a path that we're heading in right now, and it's just not going to change real quick. And working in municipal government for the past 15 years has given me the perspective of looking at what that has done to our infrastructure. And it's all about, for me, it's all about what water has done for the most part to our infrastructure. So, you know, Mid-Coast Maine has an annual rainfall of about 60 inches right now, as opposed to the rest of the state that's 45 inches. I've stole some of this stuff from other people. I think you might have been involved in putting together one of these graphs. But more rain and more storms is just causing problems throughout Camden. And today, I get complaints every day because I'm in charge of the transfer station, and all the infrastructure in town too. And what people complain about every day is rain and flooding. Okay, every day. So I had 2 people come in today, and I don't think everybody realizes that they're all looking at their yard, right? And they're like, I have a puddle in my yard. And they're like, well, you know what? Everybody has a puddle in their yard. So I'm gonna just break the news to you. I can't get rid of everybody's puddle. Okay? So, and that's a fact. Every day somebody comes in and is upset because they have a puddle that happens in their yard when it rains, 4 inches in 24 hours, and they don't understand why. And then they want me to put a basin in front of their property and connect it to a pipe so I can shoot it down into the river or the ocean. And it's unrealistic to think that. So I think what we got to do is we've got to stop thinking about trying to eliminate all the water out of our yard. That'd be a big thing, a good place to start, because it's going to rain and it's going to form a puddle in your yard for a little bit. And then you know what? The next day it's going to be gone. You don't need a drain in your yard to get rid of every bit of water. It's okay. It's okay for the water to get into the ground and move into the groundwater and work its way through everything, So that's one of the things I want to share with everybody, because it just really is puzzling. So we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So, I'm in charge of the treatment plant, and the treatment plant has problems associated with rain. Okay. We have an old aging infrastructure. It's 75 years old. A lot of it, it's old clay tile pipe. It's below the water level, and all it's doing is taking in water all the time. And it's taking in water all the time because once upon a time it wasn't in the water table, but now it is because it rains all the time. And when it rains, it goes into the sewer. And guess what happens? It goes to the treatment plant. The treatment plant, yeah, they say it's rated to handle all this water, but I'm going to break the news to you. It doesn't work as well when you put a storm of 4 inches of magnitude in 24 hours. It just doesn't like that. And, it costs money to do that. every time you're aerating a tank, you're using energy. Aeration costs money. Chemicals cost money. All this stuff costs money. So because the genie's out of the bottle now, we can't really stop it, but we're gonna have to start thinking about what it's gonna do to us and how we're gonna have to react to it. And it's gonna cost us money. And a lot of the money that's costing us, we really got to prepare for what's coming. And we can't look at things the way we used to. So we have to change the way, like Jeremy was saying, how we build things. We have to change the way how we handle water. And with the treatment plant, you're going to see something coming up in the near future. It's going to be a bond requesting money to fix this infrastructure because it's just full of water. And it's going into the ocean and we're not treating it. It's like a giant leach field right now. And, I just did the big job on Pearl Street and I ripped everything up and we were only supposed to do a third of that road. And when we started looking into it, it was Swiss cheese. There was nothing left. It was just all broken up. And I had lines that were 300 feet long, laterals going to the Maine where it was plugged and water wasn't getting to the Maine anymore. And people would go away to Florida in the summer or in the winter. They'd come back in the summertime, and because they weren't there enough and they didn't use it enough, the water would go down their lateral, and it was so long it was able to act like a leach field and just leach right into the ground. And it never even really went to the Main. And we found 2 or 3 like that. So, and all of Pearl Street was a giant leach field. So we were looking, well, where's all this E. coli coming from in the river? Guess what? Everywhere. Okay, that's where it's coming from. So, you look at over here, I mean, it's pretty obvious that rain is causing a problem. And I'm going to break the news, that's not clean water coming out of there, and that's going into the ocean. Okay, so next slide,
Would
please.
someone at the end be able to switch that light off?
Yeah.
So,
Just the ones up by the screen if possible.
Yeah, it might be the one where you're confused. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yeah, maybe go back real quick just so people can see that. I mean, that's a pretty powerful, that's a lot of stuff coming out of that manhole right there, and that's all going right into the ocean. It's going right into the yacht club.
Just push them in.
Yeah. So you can go back to the next slide. So that's the treatment plant. That's what water's doing to the treatment plant. Okay. So now this is what water's doing to the roads. So we have significant rainfall events now. That's the Rollins Road. That was on the storm October 31st that Jeremy was talking about. That just ripped apart the Rollins Road. And we wouldn't see that normally. Back when I was doing this back in 2006, I didn't see this stuff. I see it all the time now. Every year, it's like, oh God, what's going to happen next? We're going to get 4 or 5 big storms, and it's going to rip apart the infrastructure. This other picture on the right is Melvin Heights, and you can't really tell in that photo, but we had hundreds and hundreds of feet of the roadway destroyed on the edge of the road, and you can see right here. See how this is about this wide. And because these storms are happening, we're not getting snow in the winter time. Now we're getting rain. The ground's frozen, so it can't get into the ground anymore. This is all a result of climate change. And it's got no place to go because we've plowed the snow that was there off to the side. And we've created a nice little berm, and the water will run down that berm right along the edge of the road and just eats away at the edge of the road. And then once it eats away at the edge of the road, it undermines the road. And once it undermines the road breaks. And, this costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix. A road is really expensive. Asphalt takes, petroleum's expensive. It costs time for people to go in and backfill this trench that's created by erosion. So what do? We have to start preparing for these things. These are things that are a result of climate change. So next slide, probably. So now we're going to talk about, the other thing I'm in charge of is the dams. So the dams, this was the West Dam on 4/30/23. This is a result of climate change. So we have a lake level policy. Lake level policy was developed back when we didn't have these problems. So now we have these problems, and originally lake level policy was set up so that it could account for hurricanes, that we could see 4 or 5 days in advance that they were coming. We could lower the lake and we could be ready for it, right? Well, we can't do that now because guess what? This storm right here, I was watching the weather. This happened on a Sunday night and I was watching it. And they were like, oh yeah, we're gonna get an inch and a half of rain. So I went in, I opened up one of the gates and should have been fine. Guess what happened? We got 5 inches in the watershed, which filled the lake up, blocked the trash rack, completely raised the water level to the point of flooding out all of McGonagall Lake and Norton Pond. And then it posed a hazard. I had to enact the emergency management plan because the downstream people that live in town were at risk of, being flooded out. And this is all a result of climate change and global warming. And we have to think about, all right, well, it's wonderful that we've got this historic, dams and all these things, but we have to look at how we can make them more resilient and handle these storms, because if we don't, we're gonna have problems. And it's just a reality in the world that we're living in right now. So when we think about these things, we can't think about them the way we used to. We have to think about them in a new way, and people have to understand what's going on, and they have to listen to people that are talking about these things. And I'm really talking to the wrong group of people right here, because you all believe this. It's the other people that we have to convince this is a problem. And it's a serious problem, and it's going to cost us a lot of money. So when I'm going through the budget, everybody's like, well, why do you need more money? Well, this is why I need more money. So the other place, and I don't have a slide for this, but the transfer station. Okay, the transfer station, that was a great idea, right? We have a 300-foot quarry that and it's a giant hole. Hey, well, there's still trash in there. So we'll fill it with trash, and then the trash starts, floating to the top, and we're like, oh, well, we don't like the floating trash. Well, let's light it on fire. So then they light it on fire and like, well, we don't like the smoke, so let's put some dynamite in there and blow it up. This is a true story. This is what they did years ago. And then eventually, they filled it up enough where there was no more water, and now we got a mound. Okay. So now there's a mound, but there's a well in there. And guess what? The well is pumping 24/7. And guess where it goes? It goes to the treatment plant. And guess where it goes after the treatment plant? It goes to the ocean. Okay. And that's fine and dandy, but when you have more rain, guess what? You got to pump more water. Guess what it costs to pump water 24/7 from the transfer station? $300,000 a year. Okay. So think about that when you're paying for your bag of trash and you're like, oh my God, $3 for a bag of trash. I can't take this. Well, it's because we threw trash in a hole that's 300 feet deep, and now we got to take care of it forever. That's part of it, So climate change is affecting that too. You're going to see increased pricing because our treatment plant costs are going up, and we got to charge the landfill for treating that waste. So these are all interconnected things, and it's all about water. Okay, so that's all I have to say.
It's all really great. Thank you all. We don't have a lot of time for questions. So we have
We have a few minutes for questions.
few minutes for
so-
questions. Okay, that'd be great. Anybody got questions?
Well, there's one on Zoom.
Okay.
Let's see, what is the plan for harbor resiliency? The present town long-range plan published 5 years ago doesn't say anything on the subject. Rockland has a good one. What is Camden's plan to develop harbor resiliency?
All right, I thought I touched on that, but
You may have.
so we did get, again, we got funding from the state. We are in the process of, got an RFP going out within the next month to hire an engineer to prepare construction drawings that we can take to go get additional funding to make the public landing more resilient. I will say, like Dave mentioned, every time there's a storm coming, I always, probably Dave's the same way. It's like, oh boy, what's going to happen? With this storm. There was a hurricane or a big storm that was supposed to come a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago, and I was like, because we just did, it got hit last year, Christmas time. The public landing got hammered. Public Works had to come in, and it was a kind of emergency repairs that had to be done before the season. I think that was about 156,000 or something to do all that work.
little bit more, but yeah.
And that's really a temporary repair. But so the plan is to get, again, construction drawings, that we can then go out to bid with. We're basing those on a wood report that was done. They kind of did a 30,000-foot view of all of our infrastructure. They had a couple engineers in town for a couple of days, looked at the entire public landing. And so, I mean, it'll be reinforced. I will say it's not, we can't, when you're talking about this kind of stuff, it's either you adapt to where you are, you would retreat. We can't really retreat from the public landing. I mean, the public landing is where it is. We've got vertical walls pretty much around the entire inner harbor, for the most part. So the infrastructure will be resilient. We're not going to have it's a parking lot for the most part. That's the kind of infrastructure you want to get flooded. You don't want buildings to get flooded, but green space or parking can get flooded. The water leaves and it comes and goes. But the infrastructure that we have down there, the wharf itself, the harbor master building, that's going to be tweaked and that will be raised. The restroom facilities that are there, we're going to address that as well. And there's a sewer pump station right down there is there a pump station right attached to the restroom facility. So we're going to look at all of that stuff on how we can, again, make that more resilient. And there's a lot of federal money right now to do these kind of projects. And that's why we're moving forward with this RFP that's going out. And then hopefully my hope is that we can have within 2 years, I'm already in the process of seeking grants to actually do a project once that happens. So hopefully within 2 years, we can have a project underway to make the landing more resilient.
Thank you. Question
I
here?
just wanted to ask a question, put a plug, the River Citizens Advisory Group has a wonderful thing on the website showing flooding with all these maps with hurricanes and rainstorms. So I urge everybody to go on that website. And I think Courtney, you know where it is, how to find it. But my question is, isn't our public safety building in the flood zone? And I know Kevin.
We have a
What do we do
backup
about that?
plan.
I think it's in the 500 year actually, which is probably the true flood zone that we should probably be looking at, to be honest with you.
But is there a discussion of moving it, or do you just have a plan that all the fire trucks go somewhere else?
Well, our emergency action plan requires us to meet at the Congregational Church. Because that's in the flood zone. The actual public safety buildings in the flood zone.
There was another question over here.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. You guys talk about RFPs. What is an RFP?
Oh,
I've heard
I'm
the
sorry.
term before, but I
Yeah.
can't remember what it
It's just a request for proposals.
Okay.
You send that out and then engineering consulting firms will respond and they'll submit to that RFP.
It's like holding bidding, isn't it?
Yeah.
There and then there.
In the community resilience partnership
Mhm.
grants, I didn't hear you mention, heat pumps. I heard you mention a new boiler. Have there been any heat pumps involved in your grant?
We didn't install any, what did we install?
Yeah, we installed one at the public works building, 3 at the wastewater treatment facility, 2 at the public safety building, and can't recall. I think that's.
New boiler here.
And have you
Yeah.
found that, have you found those to be a positive?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the public safety building, it was pretty helpful. That building had some problems. We're trying to convert right now they have a boiler that runs the hot water, so the hot water is running, they need hot water for the summertime. We need to convert that to a heat pump hot water tank, and then once we do that, then we're pretty much gonna shut the boiler down during the summertime. And then we would only need to run the boiler in the wintertime, because they have radiant heat before. So you use the radiant heat to kind of maintain the basic temperature, and the heat pumps act to kind of do the little bit of variation.
I will say, not us, but property owners, you need permits for heat pumps. And from my office, and we've done about 110 or so heat pump permits this year for residents in Camden, residents and businesses. we've done, we have permitted 54 solar installations this last year around Camden.
Follow up to that, sorry.
I think that's all we have time for. We have to, you can kind of mingle and ask questions, but I'm gonna have to put this stuff away.
And I would say, anyone wants to reach out to me anytime, feel free. You can find me at the town office anytime.
Thank you all.
Thank you.